Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to today's episode. Living for the greatness of the world of worlds. And what sort of truths await our human species? It's a bit windy today, but hopefully the background audio is audible and so is my voice. Please let me know if there's issues with how the episode is being heard. What can I say? An idea arose to me. An idea that I think that subconsciously all human beings wonder about. You see, the nature of the human mind is directed by attention. Really what living is where our attention goes. And what existence is the energy that we pilot, we navigate and give direction to. We cannot ignore an existential position to human intelligence, and we cannot ignore an experiential position. And the way the human intelligence is happening is that when we wake up in the morning, it's as if our body is in the world and our mind awakens to the world, logs into the world. Existence is a layer, we can say it's a dimension of the world that doesn't necessarily change in accordance to psychological experience. So the person can sleep and their body will exist, but their psychology, they log out of their conscious mind. You know, really what sleep is we log out of a conscious reality and we are stationed in an unconscious reality like deep sleep, and then dream states are like we log into a subconscious reality. You know, guys, I'm noticing the way I'm sitting down, the wind is hitting my face. It's kind of like imagine giving a podcast in the highway when your head's out of the window, like out of the window of your car. You know, that's how I'm feeling right now. There is a poetic value to the idea behind this episode, and then there's an observation of the nature of what's going to happen to our minds and bodies. To be a human being is to be part of an existential event, but to also be an individual human being is to have your own access to this existential event. When I say living for the greatness of the world of worlds, it's a poetic and philosophical device, you can say. When a person says the world of worlds, or you can say the door of doors, or the person can say, you know, the self of selves. You know, it's a poetic technique. But in actuality, language points to reality. So when we access language, the language is turning into a film or an image. You know, when I was younger, understanding felt like I gotta learn the language and then understand what the language is about. But later on, I realized knowledge is, in some sense, an internal cinematic experience. And especially when it comes to oration or speech or anybody talking or communicating, there is something of value ahead of the moment behind your eyes, and then you in some sense can do it. You know, when we think about what options we have in reality, the options of our let's say the different paths that a creature in a world can go is really dependent on what sort of probabilities of how the moment will go forth there are in the intelligence of the being. Based on the dimensions that we, let's say, fragment or categorize reality in, there comes an idea of the future of reality. For example, this episode, when I say living for the greatness of the world of worlds, it's as if indirectly I'm saying living for the greatness of the worlds that will come in the future, you know. or even from a mystical context, what is the greatest world, what is the greatest state, right? Because when it comes to existence, we're biological organisms, but when it comes to experience, right, we are psychological entities. You know, that means what the mind is very different than how the body is. If somebody was like, Mr. Within, what kind of physical being are you? What kind of embodied being are you? I would consider myself as an evolutionary animal, 4.5 billion years in the making, with rare privileges of how our tools in the future will create us. So we are creatures that it wasn't enough just existing, and experience required purpose. And due to the changing nature of reality, we are all actually functioning under an innate existential purpose. You know, it's as if when it comes to survival, we're all playing that game. But when it comes to why we are surviving in reality, that's the game of the mind, a game of the experience. And in some sense, what can we do with experience? Or in some sense, what can we do with the wisdom of our life? And in what I have noticed is that the human mind gives an opportunity to plan ahead. Really, the power of human intelligence is that it can at least consciously, to some degree, choose how it will enter the future, or through which context it is holding its future. If somebody said, Mr. Within, what kind of mental being are you? What kind of mind are you? Even though I have I have honestly not had people ask me this, but it's something where I've been waiting to see how many people recognize that there's an unknown variable behind my eyes, and how many just take me as being just the visible physical phenomenon. If I was to explain what sort of mental being I am, what sort of mind I am, I would say that I am a type of being that has noticed that experience of existence starts off biologically as a first-person point of view. So right now, my intelligence is appearing as something unknown, looking out through my eyes at a world that can be known. Now, there's certain parts of the world that cannot be known, right? But to some degree, there is enough content for identity to take shape and structure. It's like, to be a human being, we don't need to know everything in the world, but we need to know enough that we are in a world. If I was to, again, give a direct answer to what sort of mind I am an unknown mind. And it took me a while to realize that I had to, hilariously escape the kingdoms of my ego, because the nature of the mind is that when it pinpoints itself in reality, it's in some sense, imagine someone walking in the snow, and there being footprints on the snow, and all those footprints are your memories of your past self, but the memories of the past self have come to be directed by the current sense of self in the moment, right? Really what it is that knowledge is actually how the past could notice it changed. Knowledge is really, meaning is from the past, This is why I would say also the concept of love is very mysterious. Television shows try to depict love, but really what I would say the truth of love is beyond just existential and experiential comfort. There's some people who, let's say, love objects. There are some people who love subjects. And then there's some people who are loving the unknown, right? So I could say that when I was a young child, before I had any idea of metaphysics, spirituality, I was living as a secular entity. It's like before the children has ideas, it's just the physical movement of the realm, So it's as if the secularists are looking at how matter is in the room. Their attention is on matter, on an object. You can say the religious group, their attention is on a subject. Religious people are great examples of how you live inside an idea. Actually, it's an incredible. There's a value to religion that surpasses the truth of its ideology, because when it comes to truth, whose eyes are open to what moment and where? In order to be able for me to explain the world of worlds, I have to start from explaining what is the world. And the world is how, just like we have two eyes that see the moment, it's as if our life in matter and our life in space are being a singular moment. It's as if right now I notice that I'm a physical biological organism, a physical self in a physical world, because I'm standing in the world that's physical. You know, but simultaneously how I know I'm a physical being is non-physically. You know, this is where the mystery of emotions, the mystery of the intangibility of thought, right? So many people say imagination is not real, right? But imagination is visible. That means if I look at, I'll give you an example. Right now I'm looking at my laptop, it's physical, I'm touching it. But if I was to close my eyes and visualize my laptop in a different color in front of me, or a different laptop, I could see something in my eye, in my mind when I close my eyes. That's the bizarre thing about the nature of the mind. We don't need light to see. The light is like pre-recorded or something. So a person can close their eyes, imagine something, and they are seeing something. That means it's visible, but it's not tangible. Like I can imagine a Ferrari, right? But it doesn't mean that Ferrari is in front of me right now. Do you know? So it's like I have access to the vision of it, but I can't touch it. So similarly, when we look at reality, how we know we are physical is actually through how the mind is happening. It's as if the brain is doing something, and the brain, what it is doing leads to a strange effect. Do you understand? It's like a physical, object-oriented creature being capable to close its eyes and see non-physical probabilities of how the moment can happen and go forth, right? Really, the human mind, it's based on a series of discoveries, I would say. The future time is an ability of awareness, but it is not a defining factor of awareness. So, I have thought about this idea of, let's say I'm here on this planet existentially 100 years. So imagine somebody gave you 100-year hall pass into existence, you know. Or let's say you buy a ticket to a concert and you attend the concert, but the concert is physical existence, right? And you've forgotten who you were before you entered the room of manifestation. It's like our body is born, but our minds are locked into. They are not born, you know. That means it's poetic to say the birth of a new mind, you know, but at the same time, the mind is not an object, and it is objects and the state of their composition that suggests the idea of creation and destruction. You know, I found it really fascinating that my body is something that was existentially created by my parents, and at the same time, my mind is something which, in some sense, it's strange that it's as if my mind wasn't born, my mind was found. You know, it's like an object suddenly animating to itself as a subject, right? And then free will being how the idea of us is being us and then moving us. I think at some point every human being wonders about what is the value of life, and notices that it's a system, and then the attention wonders, the intellect specifically wonders about what is the value of the system that my intelligence is creating value or holding value. you know. So it's as if the person's like, okay, let's say I want to live for a world, or just imagine back in the day some knight wants to serve a kingdom. So the knight has to be like, okay, what kind of kingdom am I serving? And when that question comes, what kind of kingdom am I serving, the idea comes, what sort of king am I serving? So this idea can be hilariously a replacement for the world of worlds, because let me tell you why. Because it seems like when a human being lives for something outside of it, hilariously, we're living for that physical entity, which is a world, but we're also living for how our mind perceives that physical entity. You know, a huge realization, which I think will get rid of a lot of conflict, right, is that human beings stop looking at moments as if they are perfect or imperfect. You know, duality is a changing system. Right? If the moment we're a dualistic entity, think of it this way: the moment you do something good, you have the potential to do something bad. The moment you do something bad, you have the potential to redeem yourself, do something good. It's as if every side, it's like a coin is flipping in space, and the whole human species is running. You know, imagine, you know, imagine a giant coin with 8 billion people on it, and then the coin starts tilting and people run to the top of it not to fall, to go to the other side, right? It's kind of like we are what life is in a static way is an object, but the concept of an object is something that could philosophically be considered to be void, right? That means the same way the mind is certain that it is an object. Like the way I could look at this moment and be like, okay, I'm a physical human being in like a giant world in this physical earth, and that's it. Like I could choose to have a snapshot photo acceptance of what I am, a static acceptance of what I am, right? But in reality, everything is moving. So it's in some sense the person wondering about what is the belief of my static sense of self, and what is the belief of that dynamic experiential component to my intelligence that is kind of like something is traveling through all the ways that the brain coordinates itself. It's as if every day we wake up, the brain simulates itself multiple times, and it's as if rather than having one singular consciousness right throughout the day, it's kind of like, you know, imagine it's like trying to play a video game, but the computer is restarting every second, in a nanosecond. Every time you blink, imagine the computer resets. You gotta, you know, and even though the eyes open, even though the computer resets, the checkpoint isn't lost. Let me tell you something fascinating I realized about the nature of mind, and it was thanks to these Mr.Within talks. There was a time I was saying something, and then I got distracted. And when I got distracted, for some reason, I had to say the whole thing again, right, from the beginning to be able to clearly say it. And I wondered, okay, what is it in my psyche? Just what is it in the human psychological position that when it does something and it's incomplete, it seeks to overdo it from the beginning? You know. And I was thinking, okay, is this like an idiosyncrasy to me, or is this something deeper? And then I realized it's the nature of being a creature in a dualistic realm. You know, I think better than saying we are human beings is better to say we are dualistic beings. Physical life is a dualistic dimension. So imagine, this is from my own school of thought. You could say this is what I'm going to tell you is from Mr. Withinian school of thought. But what it is that I look at this world, and if somebody, imagine Okay, this is an intense example, but imagine a meteor was about to hit Earth, and I had like just the time for like a one sentence to like tell people what is this world, you know? It's 4 dimensions acting as one. This world is like 4 worlds inside one. That means I have thought about this to a degree where I have tried to see something beyond it, and I was like, okay, there's been this many philosophers in history, there's been so many writers, so many different ideological systems inspired in let's say the linguistic simulation in our history, in the history of man's mind and its development and its vision, so many ideological systems. And then I was thinking, okay, what is the full edge of the context? You see, there's some people who want to explore the conceptual position of something, and there's some people who are trying to explore the contextual position. You know, that means it's like, imagine person A and person B are talking to one another. Imagine person B wants to see the conceptual view, wants to try to see what kind of concept person A is, and imagine person A wants to see what sort of context person B is in. You know, what knowledge is knowing what is happening in what world. That's really what knowledge is. Anyways, back to the poetic value of living for the greatness of the world of worlds. If a human being wonders, okay, what is the point of this world? You know, kind of like to wonder about the purpose of what does it mean to be a human being in a world, right? It's equivalent to like a soccer player suddenly waking up in the middle of a soccer game on a soccer field, right? And then wondering what's the point of me being in this game of karma and in this reality of life, in this game and in this field of life. On some level, we have to play the game of existence. To want to escape the game of existence doesn't make sense. To want to fight the world doesn't make sense. Really, there are 4 dimensions. The simplest way I have managed to explain this is that every human being has access to 4 types of states of mind, right? And each of us have different cultivations in these states of mind. Right now, I can look at the moment in the world and be like, okay, it's 0. The world is a giant 0. The world is nothing. The meaning, there is no, it's like matter doesn't mean anything. It's like the moment the mind is seen as a hallucination of an elemental reality, it's as if the concept of the value of the mind is reduced to the geometry we give existence. You know, what we don't realize is that our certainty in phenomena is attention to shape. So I could look at this reality and be like, or I could look at myself, be like, okay, what is the value of living in a world or for a world? And it's like I could look at myself and be like, okay, myself is nothing. I'm nothing right now. And I could look at the world and be like, okay, the world is nothing, and I could just live life as if I'm staring into a giant empty room. You know, that's one state of mind that's accessible. You know, I call this the void in Mr.Withinian thought, the void. The void, anytime there is anything going absent from how the moment is held, the mind is noticing the void, noticing emptiness. In Buddhism, emptiness is very crucial, because the Buddha looked at an object and was like, yo, this object doesn't have a nature, it's my attention. The object doesn't have a mind, I have the mind. My mind, when it looks at the object, is imbuing the object with its nature. Right? That means it's like the color, blue and red are neither good or evil, but for example, in Star Wars, they are. We imbue that sort of nature to the color, you know. So we are putting in value in objects that their nature is empty. So the nature of physical reality is empty. Anybody who's desired physical phenomena, it's like even the atom is preaching that it's 99.9% space. You know, it seems to be the case. So the void is very important to acknowledge. And if a person cannot acknowledge the void, they cannot acknowledge it's very important to acknowledge the void. It's like, you know, it's like experiencing the tragedy of meaning, and then once the tragedy of meaning has been experienced, then in some sense there is nothing. It's as if nothing cannot lose. You know, it's like a starting point. The consciousness resets every time it notices the void. So another position is the singularity, the singular. So I explained the number 0 as a context to a state of mind. Now I'm going to explain the number 1 as a context to a state of mind. And what is the implication of this? I can right now be like there is no me and there is no world, and the whole game of being a person in a world is like the act of the mind, and I can choose to treat everything as my whole moment of being. This is the singularian state. You can say you become a singularian, right? Those who recognize the void, they become voidists. Usually chaotic archetypes are open to that. You know, people don't realize a lot of cultural evil is because the person, in some sense, feels they don't have a value. When somebody feels they can't be redeemed, they forget seeking. They forget about seeking the better. We have to redeem our species. I'm saying, like, rather than thinking we're an inferior, ignorant, foolish creatures on a rock, we should have the vision that we're the most advanced beings in the universal sector, and we are fearlessly engaging and approaching and understanding all states of mind. Right? It's as if we start with an ultimate value behind our eyes and then live in an ultimate world in front of our eyes. The singularity is pretty much non-dualism. Right? So the void is non-dual, the singular is non-dual. Pretty much think of it this way. I've pretty much designed a system where the number 0, the symbol 0, the symbol 1, the symbol 2, the number 2, and this infinity symbol explain all quadrants of psychological experience. Pretty much, I can be nothing, I can be everything, I can be two things in regards to a self and a world, and then I can be infinite. And the infinite is something where, technology is going to bring forth a new excitement into it, but really, what an infinite self is that the person, how would I say it? It's like, imagine everybody's psychology is driven by how they are a temporary, a finite being, a limited creature, right? But if right now, imagine there was a pancake flip of of civilization, and everybody felt like, imagine everybody had the psychology of an immortal entity. That means an immortal entity doesn't have fear anymore, doesn't even have the concept of success anymore. You just become a watcher of worlds, and then it's just a choice into which world you go. Think of it this way, with the human experience, and let's say if it was a lesser dimension, through a manner of speech, it's like we're here trying to see what kind of self should I be. But really, it's like, think of it this way, there's beings right now in the cosmos thinking about what kind of worlds to be, and there's beings right now who are thinking what kind of self to be, right? The self in the world, especially through the evident nature of a fractal, are the same. Our species, because of its biological acknowledgement, is creating the idea of a world. That means if we were right now part of the Earth, there would be no separation. It's like we can't even say we're on the Earth. But because somehow there's a separation, there's a physical separation from the Earth, which is our body, and then there's a psychological separation from the Earth, where we notice our body is separate from the world. To be a creature is an incredible opportunity to see the value of a self in the world. So imagine, like, reality was like a coin, and one side of the coin we're experiencing how a self is in a world, learning from the world, and how in some sense on the other side of the coin there's a world in the self, right? And let me tell you the bizarre nature of mystical human psychology. That means the human psychology that has wondered about the unknown to a degree that it realizes what is looking through its eyes is unknown, and then realizes the same. It's as if the common denominator between the unknown observer and the unknown observed is the unknown action. It's kind of like if we want to go beyond knowledge, it's as if we identify as unknown beings. Can you imagine hilariously, like, extraterrestrials in the future land on Earth, like in a sci-fi story I'm gonna say here, like, imagine extraterrestrials land on Earth, and then they come up to us and they're like, what kind of beings are you? And imagine we look at those extraterrestrials and we'd be like, yo, if these guys don't know what we are, they're not that advanced. But imagine we tell them, imagine the extraterrestrials say, what kind of human beings do you know what you are? And we say to the extraterrestrials, no, we have no clue. We're unknown beings in an unknown world. Right? It's as if the human beings, like the aliens, land and then nobody is surprised, imagine. Imagine extraterrestrials land in the future in the most, let's say, sci-fi, majestic way, right? And let's say they're enlightened, advanced extraterrestrials, right? Imagine they land, and then we don't have a single reaction. Like, it's like it's not a big deal for us. And the extraterrestrials are like, you guys kidding me? No extraterrestrial has shown itself to humanity until now physically. Why aren't you guys fascinated or surprised? And we'll be like, because in our inner realms, we fathomed it. In our inner realms, we have confronted the strangeness of the world, but in front of our eyes, we're a stranger in it. The concept of mysticism is realizing that what is moving the free will is strange, and what strange means is that there isn't a known way of interpreting what's happening. I thought about it in regards to the concept of time, and I'm like, okay, if there was a truth spread out in time, we could kind of interact with it. But if truth is instantaneous, can you imagine somebody says, I can show you God, right? And the person's like, what do you mean you can show me God? And this happened to this yogi called Papaji, okay? Papaji, the seeker of ultimate truth went to this yogi and told this yogi, show me God, okay? Now, I'm going to stop here and I'm going to say what I wanted to say before telling you the story. Or let me just say, Papaji goes to Shri Ramana Maharshi, right? And he asks this enlightened guru this question. And he says, show me God and I'll prostrate in front of you. He says this, right? And let me tell you the details of the exact story. So Papaji was this guy who in India who had joined the military, but he was a truth seeker. He had a sort of mystical dimension to his life, active from the beginning of his life. So he was wondering about truth. And so he had enlisted in the army in India, right? And so when he was relaying, like there's videos of him sharing the story on YouTube. And so Papaji says he wore his military uniform and he went to all the ashrams where they were self-proclaimed holy enlightened saints, and he would ask all of them, show me God right now, you know, and then I'll, in some sense, I'll bow down to you and I'll serve you for the rest of my life or something. And imagine he had a military uniform, so when he would enter, everybody would kind of like, you know, be a bit tense. The situation would be tense, right? And so he went to all the ashrams until he came and found Ramana Maharshi, and he says, can you show me God in an instant? And I believe Ramana Maharshi says, God is not something to show. You know, he says something like that. Now, this is where I'll say, it's kind of like what I'm trying to say is that if we look for truth as a character in a story, the character in the story's reality is spread out in time. But if somebody wanted to see an instantaneous truth, an instantaneous truth means that there is no time for the image to change. It's like somebody is wondering about the instantaneous value of truth, right? And somebody wondering about the value of truth over the spread of the time of history, let's say historic time. What I'm trying to say is an instant cannot be compared to anything else. The value of an instant. That means whoever you are right now, for an instant, ask yourself what you are and wonder about the instantaneous answer of your being. You know, the idea is that truth doesn't have a partner. You know, which is another way of saying. The inconceivable, I guess theologically, the inconceivable origin of reality doesn't have a counterpart. So when a human being wonders about truth, like those human beings that think they are the truth, it's like in some sense they haven't realized the immensity of the presence of the unknown. You know, instantaneously, truth has to be. So by being, you are kind of being truth. You're being present with truth. It's as if the imagination of God is still a part of God. But I'm trying to say that man's soul does not replace the totality of the unknown. It just gives us access to a certain unknown. As if our body's not just giving access to a known world, right? It's giving us access to an unknown world, and that's where the whole problem solving of reality comes. It's like a changing event. It's like being a creature in a world is riding a horse into an unknown battlefield, you know? It's like an army. Imagine it's like we're all the cavalry of consciousness, you know? The cavalry of the human species. It's like we're riding our attention, our conscious moment is moving our body in accordance to the values that we have considered or capable of considering. You know, it's like realizing how many ways are there to look at the world. That it's like the person asking themselves, how many ways are there to look at this moment that I haven't looked at yet, you know? Right now we're living at a time where there's YouTubers who have problem with finding content. And for me, I have the complete opposite attitude where I'm like, the world is this infinitely vast and unknown place, and so much of it has not been archived in language. You know? There is no one way for everything, right? I've realized this, that life is one of those things that if you have expectations on, you shape, and expectation is the reaction to a moment. You know, for example, when I talk about an advanced civilization, I'm looking at current civilization, and I'm wondering how many other advanced ways of this happening can there be. You know, why have not, billions of people on the planet asked the great question, you know, what is the legacy of the human species? So many people working to, right now we're living in the era of artificial kings and queens, right? The ego thinks it is a crown upon the moment, but we're going to realize that to be a human being ultimately means to be humanity, right? You know, there will come a time where the person will not just feel like just a human creature in the world. You will feel your species, you know. Right now we're doing it through language, poetry, and whatnot, but in the future, it's as if the feeling, just like imagine, imagine 8 billion lions, and they found the pride of the most honorable civilization, most advanced civilization. What can we do? Reality on a psychological level, it's performance based. It's like the person's like, yo, I got a soul, and then somebody says, okay, you got a soul, nice. How did your soul move? And that's through the whole display and showcase of psychology, right? It's as if we are internally being something, and when we trust it, it externalizes. You know, really, what creativity is trusting your vision, and when you trust it, you become fearless and communicative. But if you don't trust your vision, then it's another way of saying consciousness doesn't know why it's looking at it. I'm pretty much like, okay, temporary evolutionary creature, among, and it's like the whole species is acting like it's living together, But at the same time, it's like we are natural beings, but we're living like zombies and robot zombies, That means, I'm just thinking which is more scary, like like a group of zombies approaching, or a group of robots which have been programmed the same behaviors as zombies. So robot zombies is robots acting like zombies, Anyways, there's better ways to talk about this. What I'm trying to say is that civilization 1.0 is enchanted by the desires of an individual inner life to ignore the value of how great the outer life can be. Right now, if somebody was like, is civilization succeeding or failing? If somebody asked me, Mr. Within, this human civilization so far right now that you see, it's like, do you feel it's failing or it's succeeding? And I would say it's in limbo. Our species right now is numb, but it is not ignorant. To me it feels like every human being on the planet is waiting for something. Everybody is waiting for something, and the realization of that is how much they trust the world to have the world animate. I'll personally say that there's been situations in my life where by not trusting the moment, I have disconnected myself from the moment. That means ultimately our behavior, there is a subconscious feeling of whether we trust how the moment should happen, or how the moment will happen, or we don't trust it. Anything we don't trust, we try to disconnect, and then the nature of karma is that it pulls you. You know, there's some people right now in the driver's seat of reality of consciousness, and there's some people in the passenger seat of consciousness. You know, we're living at a time where not only are we questioning our existential position and value system, but we're questioning our psychological value. That means the species, right? The fact that the species doesn't realize it's one species, the fact that human beings geometrically look like each other has not been important enough for the union of it. You see, think of it this way: imagine there's 8 billion designers. Okay, imagine we had this anime, you know, comic book show. What's it called? Dragon Ball Z, right? And in the story of this narrative, pretty much the main character is born from a warrior species, but like Superman, you know, gets you know, lost on another planet. You know, you know, it's like found on another planet. So in that story, there was a warrior species, right? All the human beings in that narrative, even the youngest children, the oldest people, they were all standing like warriors, men, women, all of them. They were like, had a warrior species mentality. You know, the whole species had a warrior mentality. Now, when I look at Earth and I'm like, okay, let's imagine a scenario like that for Earth. For me, I was like, more interesting than a warrior species is a designer species. Really, we are incredible. Like, the species has an incredible craftsmanship ability. Do you know, it's like the purpose of biological life is the constant display of advanced skill. That means it's like, you know, there's something deep about the concept of competition that even goes beyond, you know, the outcome of the competition. That means the concept of competition has a more deeper ancient root, you know, rather than in today's era kind of sort of economical capitalistic competition, right? You know, it's as if there are so many billionaires on the planet that when I think about, you know, and when I think about the abstraction of money, it's just like how we valued humanity. You know, we have to realize there is a priceless value to the rarity of creatures finding themselves in the same moment. Like, that's the value of reality. Our eyes are in the same room. Now, what do we do in this room of life, in the void where the singular existence experiences itself dualistically, to wonder about what is beyond duality, and realizing that once you are content with the void, once you're content with the singular, once you're content with the dual, then your psyche is only left to entertain an infinite archetype. So the person's inner visions shift to an infinite context. So the person's not thinking about, you know, it's like, or if somebody's trying to imagine somebody thought they were a fortune teller. And the fortune teller, and imagine somebody goes to a fortune teller and says, I want to know what happens, you know, like in like 100,000 years from now. And the fortune teller's like, okay, man, that's going to cost you way more. You know, if we were to just fathom, if the brain was to attempt to fathom the future of the future, right? And because the concept of the world is dependent on this, our psychological approach to the future, you know, it's like the future generations. Think of it this way: the greatest potential of the future generations is watching how all the human beings alive in 2022 are looking at the future. To be an infinite being means to have an infinite value system. Therefore, nothing makes sense when you're an infinite being, because it's like infinity plus 1 equals infinity, infinity minus 1 equals infinity. So an infinite being is a non-dualistic psychological entity. Dualism is 1/4 of the world. That means I'm saying our species, civilization 1.0, is being based on like 1/4 of how the world is. It's as if we're on a world, but we're living on 1/4 in a quarter of it, right? Imagine all human beings were just living, in one small place, It's such a privilege, maybe in the far future, the let's say grandchildren or future generations of humanity, they're going to open history books and they're going to be either in sky cities or interstellar cities, and they're going to be like, man, there was a time where children could play on the earth. Like, we would become the legend of the future, or a legend for the future. Really, it's kind of like to even be a creature that communicates, it's like saying energy wants to, it's like energy's march toward infinity. For me, thinking of human history as just like how many, when I try to imagine how many human beings have been born on this planet, and how many different psychological constitutions every human being has had, how many hidden ways life has been happening, or is maybe even happening, that we don't know. Just like we think about the value of a system, to be alive as a creature in a world is to it's like you are being the known value to an unknown system. The future is all the ways that our mind can move but hasn't. When I think about the genius ability of the human mind to engage design, 8 billion designers on a planet cannot, in some senses, as if they just have to unite to build the greatest design, then everybody relaxes, That means, imagine there was the next level global agenda, right? But it was the global agenda where the story of reality had changed into it. It's as if we honor the archetype of royalty by giving the future royalty. You know what I mean by this? Imagine in an advanced civilization, we interpret it as, in some sense, giant castle or giant kingdom. And we are the kingdom of humanity, just like there's the mineral kingdom, planet kingdom, there's the kingdom of the human species. That means the walls of the kingdom of humanity is how many human beings are existing in the moment in the space-time continuum. Now, if every human being in this kingdom is serving a king, now imagine the king is not anybody who is in the present or the past. The king of the kingdoms of humanity is the future. That means it's like if there was a crown, if we were to crown anyone, it should be the future generations. That means imagine till the end of time, every person is serving the future advancement of their moment rather than just content in their moment. Kingdoms were the first examples in history of the display of the psychology of a collective entity. Every person has to wonder about their spectrum of sight. How many ways have you in this lifetime, been cultivating indirectly, let's say, modes of perception? The greatness of the future is the greatness of the potential of the past, present, now. I'm really thinking, what else can I say about living for the greatness of the world of worlds? There's a way the intelligence is present in the moment, and there's a way that how it's being present is how it's accessing the moment. If the human species didn't fear the unknown, it would allow itself to use the ability of the mind. It's like a soccer player on the field has to use all of its ability to, in some sense, accomplish something. So imagine 8 billion human beings decided to play the game of the advanced civilization. It's like wondering about what an advanced humanity would look like. What would an advanced version of every moment look like? And the realization is that there's infinite ways. Really, what human civilization right now is, it's like an unnatural event taking place inside a natural event. And we are natural creatures unnaturally living in nature. Why unnatural? Because there's this idea that, you can study a jaguar like when it's running in the field and be like, that's what a jaguar is. Or you can cage a jaguar and then define that caged jaguar as what a jaguar is, right? The animal. So what I'm trying to say is that we are a natural entity that has caged itself unnaturally to be able to access an unnatural reality. And the reason we are playing this game of characters in the story of the world is because the void was too unbearable. That means our ancestors were first frightened by the creatures in the world. Then they were frightened by the bizarreness of how the world is here. For me, every day I wake up, I think indirectly till the end of my lifetime, I'll be wondering about what is reality, you know? What is the nature of reality the species doesn't know, rather than creating hollow simulations of, you know, I don't know how to say it, the species is playing in the sandbox of a simulation, not realizing the sandbox is in the battlefield of an unknown presence. Something unknown is happening. To be a spiritual person means you have noticed the unknown move in your moment, or your moment move in an unknown way. To be a mystic is to reach that realization that you are also an unknown being. When you are an unknown being, then the question comes, what is the boundary setter of the psyche? Right, that means how is the person of being a person in the world? And that depends on what kind of world they see. We can say there can be two approaches to a psychological release, and this means that a person has to change themselves to solve the problem, or they have to change the world they're seeing to solve the problem. And the self-actualization in Maslow's hierarchy of needs in the humanistic psychological perspective, it's as if we are being something, and the psychology is being motivated by what else this can be. You know, it's as if, imagine right now you were the greatest painter, right? And then you were like, okay, I've become the greatest artist. Then what? Then you realize you become, for example, the greatest designer, and the mind keeps jumping towards the advancement of how incredible the experience of life can be. You see, it's as if life is neither a good place or a bad place. Life is a place where how you use it suggests what kind of place it is. The intent, right? If people of any psychological display were like, you know, people don't realize how much of psychology depends on philosophy. There will come a very important moment where psychologists will ask philosophers for help, because they've reached this a point where they're stuck, you know. That means it's similar to the problem of consciousness. The way we are telling the story of our world makes it impossible to know it, but it's based on the acceptance of reality. The era of collective mindhood, given, like, I don't know, 200 to 400 years, maybe even 100 years, who knows. 100 years is too soon, right? But there will come a point where cyberspace will be a part of our body, not in our brains. That means don't think as if there's going to be a chip in your brain. Think about this way, that there's going to be, you could just go stand in this booth and your mind through waves just connects to cyberspace. You know, there doesn't need to be something going in your brain, a sort of wave technology. Imagine, you know, a cyber portal. So in the future, imagine just like telephone booths. There's going to be a booth and the person enters there and they can enter cyberspace, you know. What it is that it's not just the self that's evolving. The self-evolving is changing its perspective. So it's another way of saying internally the world is evolving as we live as a self. So it's kind of like why the world is here to give us a self, and we are here to use this self to advance the world quality. For me, the concept of advancement goes beyond dualism. That means if somehow I was, let's say, in this important position in, let's say, in a world, and they brought me the most chaotic beings and the most ordered beings, like imagine the angels and demons are poetically fighting, and they brought like the leaders of the angels and the leaders of the demons in front of, imagine, like some general, okay? And so that person, it's like, this is the difference of an advanced being, is that an advanced being is seeing so many ways that a moment can happen that to reject, to close the value of the moment becomes unnecessary. So imagine the leaders of chaos and the leaders of order are asking this, let's say, if they, okay, here, I'll use it. If they were to ask me about, like, okay, how should the future look like? My argument would be that if chaos doesn't want to change, and if order doesn't want to change, and they still want to continue chaos and order's timeless battle, and not timeless, endless battle in time, right? That means if chaos and order want to keep fighting, my attitude would be like, okay, let's build an advanced civilization so that the chaos and order can access the most advanced chaos and the most advanced order. You know, because what freedom means is that there is no individualistic preference contaminating the potential of a collective reality. That means there will come a time where I think everybody who hears these Mr.Within talks, they're realizing I am pointing at something. All these lectures are my hand pointing towards the potential advancement that awaits humanity in the inconceivable future. What is revelation other than the arrival of new reality? To in some sense serve the kingdom of humanity is to serve the future generations. To serve the future generations, the idea is we do the best we can, and then the torch is passed down, you know. So it's as if, imagine 8 billion human beings tried their best to wonder about how advanced of a being they can be in the moment, and it's as if we go as far as we can so the future generations don't have to go through it unnecessarily, right? I'm saying if it's another way of saying, like, if I act as if if I advance 4,000 years into the future, let's say 10,000 years into the future, if I'm trying to live as if I am a being 10,000 years in the future compared to now, right? It's as if the future generations are going to live as if they were 100,000 years ahead. You know, their vision would extend, and the era of collective mindhood will actually make psychology a sort of like, think of it this way: the more advanced the moment is being considered, the more the multidimensionality of it can be acknowledged. Our problem right now on Earth is that we are afraid to comprehend reality beyond just 2 dimensions. Duality is the governor of the linguistic simulation. I'm thinking, like, if a religious person saw the title of this episode, they would be living for the greatness of the world of worlds. So it's as if in religion, at least monotheistic religion, there's this idea that God created the world and everything returns to God at the end of the world, right? So this idea is another way of saying, like, the inconceivable It's like living for the greatness of the world of worlds. It's like living in accordance to a divine inconceivable position. As if the person wondering, what sort of contexts, what sort of concepts, what sort of geometrical shapes do I want to entertain in my mind or analyze? So it's another way of saying the world of worlds. It's like if the world is in shape, it's like all shaped worlds are imagined inside an invisible world, It's like the world of worlds. And to think of it this way, the legend of this legend is not going to be for the lifetime of people on Earth, but it would be like the legend of a sort of universal advanced civilization. Right now, ours is a planetary advanced civilization, right? But if we were to do a universal advanced civilization, it would mean imagine all the different planets like Earth that could exist in the cosmos, and imagine all those species, specific species, and all those the chosen species on those planets. On those planets, it would be in some sense like the advanced civilization of all advanced civilizations, right? Or it would be the god of all the other gods, right? For polytheistic traditions. So what it is that it's like when we decide to live for truth, if our truth is ideological, our lives become limited to the condition of the idea. But for me, it's kind of like a known being in an unknown world, like a being that knows a little bit about the world is inside a giant unknown world, and this being is like, how do I live for the world of worlds? It's another way of saying you're not living for the known world of all known worlds, you're living for the unknown of all unknown. Like there's a type of unknown that's connected to knowledge, and then there's an unknown that is independent of knowledge. There's a way reality is being that no creature, no entity can access. So, living for the world of worlds, the world is also an inner experience, it's a vision. A person's view on the future is actually a creation of a world, right? Like, let's say somebody in the future wants to build schools of advanced communication all over the planet, It's as if the person envisions that happening, but has to also envision what kind of world would it be if that happens. Human intelligence should be used to advance humanity's intelligence. The unexpected is if we suddenly become fearless, and when a person becomes fearless, they can be compassionate. Believe it or not, it's kind of like to be cruel is like the inability to be compassionate first. And what is compassion? Compassion is not just like your local Dalai Lama, your local monk in a temple, or Zen monk in a temple, or your local Buddhist saint, or Dalai Lama. But I'll say it more, it's kind of like compassion is the aura of a free being. Why? Because the being is so advanced that it doesn't need to do anything to know it's advanced. It knows it is already, right? It's as if you suddenly discover in your temporary life and eternal value the contribution of humanity, or the great performance of humanity in the void. That's really the real game. Nationalism, I understand, we need groups we need groups, but at the same time, it's as if when will the species step out of an internal species civil war through language and ideology, and just come to this realization that a new context to the world. Nobody knows where we are, and we're here to know it as a species. It's like the archaic revival of the great mystery of why the world is being weird. It's like a puzzle that takes a lifetime to solve, but it's hilarious at the same time, because the moment you realize the value of the world is an internal effort, is an internal placement of value on the outer, then you go becoming wondrous about how your own mind is, right? That means if I give a talk and somebody wants to try to comprehend truth through my talk, it's as if you're going to see it from, let's say, the geometry of my mind. But if you were to comprehend it through yourself, that means a person reaches a moment where they're like, wait a minute, I don't know enough about the mysterious viewer of consciousness. Like, it's like if the greatest academics cannot solve the mystery of consciousness, right? It's in some sense saying that it's like there's something unknown happening, you know. And every person's nature of mind, based on how you have lived, it's like the person honoring their mind. Maybe this is something that isn't heard often, but whoever you are in this lifetime, at least once, be very honest, simple, and humble, and honor your mind. That means, what it means is like value its unknown capability. Because genius isn't just world leaping, you know. To live for the greatness of the world of worlds is another way. This is the way I interpret it, that it's like living for the greatest value of all moments. It's as if it's no longer be kind to your neighbor, it's more like be kind to your species. You know. You know, it's kind of like somebody hearing these Mr.Within talks would be like, yo, Mr.Within, you're obsessed with advanced civilizations. And I would say, give me a reason why I shouldn't be. You know? Like, we have, like, why is the future inaccessible? Like, why are our minds capable to wonder how the future happens? Like, that's an ability. Right? Memory is an ability, and so is moving in your inner realms in accordance to visualization. People can have different relationships with their mind in different states of mind. You know, you know, for example, you know, like probably like if these talks get heard by many people, it would be like some people would hear the concepts I'm talking about. Some people would hear like the lighter. Some people would hear the cough. Some people hear the background noise, but it's really about attention, finding an ability to resurface from the simulation, right? Because it's like we are, what truth seems to be is that which is responsible for the simulation. You know, it's like we're not just artificial, we are also something true about us is being responsible for how the artificial works. The free will is a sort of realization of redemption, you know, that the moment can be piloted, that your eyes are not what the past shouted, or in some sense, you know. I don't know how to say it, but it's like the state of our mind has to do with the state of our vision. The state of our vision has to do with the state of how consciousness is envisioning itself. So it's kind of like very difficult because it's like somebody saying, how do I live in the greatest world? And imagine there being the precondition that you have to be the greatest self first, right? So it's as if like if we want to build the most advanced civilization, we're required to be the most advanced beings. In order to be the most advanced beings, rather than just identifying with our past, we have to have an ability to acknowledge multiple dimensions simultaneously, neutrally. right? Because the inability to observe the meaningless, like it's like when we realize the story of humanity is like candles flickering in the wind, and every human being who's born and cares for the world, they kind of like go in front to shield the candle from the wind. Do you know? It's like when something important happens, the living world, it's just the nature of the karmic reality, as if let's say, through a Vedic playful analogy, if karma was due to the lords of karma, that means imagine like there's a bunch of people sitting at a poker table, or I cannot give it a metaphor. Imagine a bunch of people sitting at a table, a bunch of students, and then they have their books open, right? Notebooks and books, and imagine like an ant walks on your notebook, and you can instantly just move your notebook, and it's like you have changed the karma of that ant, you know? So in ancient times, people did not just think they were spiritual beings, but they had this view that the spirit of reality was being, in some sense, it's as if there's states of imperfection are being held by states of perfection, you know? Or it's like an imperfect object in a perfect space. It would be like the lords of karma, the demigods, you know, or in ancient Greek mythology, like those who walked on clouds, and like it was the clouds of Mount Olympus. The lords of karma, once they realize that the human being has noticed the unknown, they watch. So it's another way of saying greater dimensions stop interfering with the individualism that has noticed its own power, right? Because for most people, they're, at least let's say, the power of their psyche is dependent on something else, you know? Sometimes I feel, for me, the idea of God is like one of the most profoundest ideas I've ever heard, you know. But at the same time, I feel there are people who are looking for truth outside of themselves, and then there are some who are looking for truth inside themselves, and then there are those who already have found it. So they're not, those who have found truth are not playing the game of finding truth, right? It's like if we were truly advanced beings, right, we would all realize that advancement is instantaneously present. We're all travelers. Consciousness is traveling through conditional materialism. It's like, you know, something immaterial is moving something material. And we wonder about, okay, why is it that we can know we're intelligent, but we can't touch our intelligence? You know, or imagine somebody is considered to be smart, you know, and imagine that the smart person it's like you can't touch the smartness. It's like the way the psyche happens is more by its trust in its founding vision, you know. I'm just suggesting in the future, identity, which is so personal and attached to the human being, we think people are people, but we're going to realize to be a creature in language is to be in a sort of linguistic Iron Man suit. An Iron Man suit made of stories. Right? Because whether it's a chaotic being or an ordered being, honesty is there for all beings. That's the nature of consciousness. Honesty is another way of saying you can be what you are before having to be what you are. You know, guys, I'm going to go into a quote tunnel and read quotes about greatness. Because living for the world of worlds is another way of saying envisioning the greatest greatness. Imagine, I don't know how else to say it. The greatest greatness is in some sense self-realizing. It is the ability of the world, not limited by the world. Human consciousness in 2022 is still in the stranger archetype on a planet. You know, what I mean by that is that it's unknown, its psychological position and its way of knowing itself, and it's come to the unknown. Just like new branches of mathematics are created to explain the mysteries and problems of past mathematics, right? Similarly, it's like new dimensions will enable greatness. Novelty will enable a ridiculous, instantaneous greatness. Now, so I'm just going to go into the quote tunnel. Winston Churchill says the price of greatness is responsibility. Lucius Annius Seneca says it is a rough road that leads to the heights of greatness. Charles de Gaulle says greatness is a road leading towards the unknown. Mahatma Gandhi says the greatness of a nation can be judged by the way its animals are treated. Bob Marley says the greatness of a man is not in how much wealth he acquires, but in his integrity and his ability to affect those around him positively. William Shakespeare, some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. James E. Faust says a grateful heart is a beginning of greatness. It is an expression of humility. It is a foundation for the development of such virtues as prayer, faith, courage, contentment, happiness, love, and well-being. Henry Ward Beecher says greatness lies not in being strong, but in the right using of strength. And strength is not used rightly when it serves only to carry a man above his fellows for his own solitary glory. He is the greatest whose strength carries up the most hearts by the attraction of his own. Yeah, because it's either the world advances or just, some dude advances, you know. Because the advancement of the world is the greatest advancement of the individual. We don't realize it. We think that right now the species is distrusting its governance, right? And of course there's reasons to do that, but I'm saying, like, in an advanced civilization, those games would be too old. It's like, why shouldn't there be, global visions of greatness, visions of global greatness. Why shouldn't we wonder about the victory of our species? That is the greatness, It's like, what contemporary candles do? They can light other candles so the whole species continues. It's another way of saying the most advanced beings, they attain something advanced, but because they are advanced, it's like there's nothing to hold on to in a changing world. So the mystery of consciousness becomes a priority, right? And the person has to wonder about the limits of their reality. Wilma Rudolph says, never underestimate the power of dreams and the influence of the human spirit. We are all the same in this notion. The potential potential for greatness lives within each of us. Blaise Pascal, man's greatness lies in his power of thought. Aristotle, suffering becomes beautiful when anyone bears great calamities with cheerfulness, not through insensibility, but through greatness of mind. That's very important, guys. What Aristotle is saying is because the person is saying in what context of reality, if you are to suffer, do you want to suffer? Or is there something beyond that suffering? The greatness of mind suggests the greatest vision that the mind can generate. The greatest vision is the accumulation, the summary of 8 billion great visions. You know, we need 8 billion. Imagine, this is really what the songs of advanced civilization are. You know, when a species gets ready to, you know, discover its worthiness for the most advanced state and the most advanced technology. Want to empower humanity's ability to discover its greatness. That is the vision. The future can be great, and that is why life will forever have a meaning. Mike Tyson says, greatness is not guarding yourself from the people. Greatness is being accepted by the people. And the way you get accepted, really, this is my understanding so far, is that you, like when a person realizes nobody else has their eyes, that's when, you know, the soul playfully smiles, right? What I mean by that is that, like, when you understand the rarity of existence, right? Like the person could be like, whoa, so many people don't exist right now. You know, or like so many people haven't even been born yet. You know, just the future of humanity is like a transcendental idea. The spirit is like imagine an archer, and the spirit, or poetically the soul, is using its mind as a bow to, in some sense, like an archery, like an archer, you know, let go of the arrow of the body, right? So, or let me say it in a better way, it's like the soul uses the mind and shoots arrows into where the free will knows the body can go. Zig Ziglar says you were designed for accomplishment, engineered for success, and endowed with the seeds of greatness. Okay, that's an incredible quote. Exactly. Anne Frank, human greatness does not lie in wealth or power, but in character and goodness. People are just people, and all people have faults and shortcomings, but all of us are born with a basic goodness. You know? Yeah, because we understand the rare opportunity of being a 4.5 billion-year-old evolutionary species where we don't know that much about what we are actually. You know, compared to the past, we're like geniuses, but compared to the future, we're like fools. You know? George Bernard Shaw says, just do what must be done. This may not be happiness, but it is greatness. Coretta Scott King, the greatness of a community is most accurately measured by the compassionate actions of its members. Anne Frank says, I read that, Alexis de Tocqueville says the greatness of America lies not in being more enlightened than any other nation, but rather in her ability to repair her faults. Yeah, you know, realities have to adjust to a sort of, it's like we have a decision to peacefully enter the future and efficiently and incredibly advance a smart way, or we inefficiently, violently, savagely stumble towards an unnecessary extinction. You know, it's like, do we want to see the species act like a fool, or do we want to wonder about the hidden genius that every moment harbors? Isaac Bashevis Singer says the greatness of art is not to find what is common, but what is unique. Edmund Burke, it is the nature of all greatness not to be exact. Robin S. Sharma says greatness comes by doing a few small and smart things each and every day, comes from taking little steps consistently, comes from making a few small chips against everything in your professional and personal life that is ordinary, so that a day eventually arrives when all that's left is the extraordinary. Wow. Yeah. Khalil Gibran says, keep me away from the wisdom which does not cry, the philosophy which does not laugh, and the greatness which does not bow before children. That greatness is that we have to honor the incredible hidden ability of all the human beings that will enter this world. Leo Tolstoy says there is no greatness where there is no simplicity, goodness, and truth. Jim Ron says whoever renders service to many puts himself in line for greatness, great wealth, great return, great satisfaction, great reputation, and great joy. Frederick Douglass says man's greatness consists in his ability to do and the proper application of his powers to things needed to be done. William Booth says the greatness of a man's power is the measure of his surrender. Grenville Kleiser says by constant self-discipline and self-control you can develop greatness of character. Edgar Allan Poe, to vilify a great man is the readiest way in which a little man can himself attain greatness. Lee Brown, you must remain focused on your journey to greatness. John Hendrik Clark says Egypt gave birth to what later would be known as Western civilization long before the greatness of Greece and Rome. The antiquity of ideology influencing human beings in phases of history, like that's, I mean, of course, history is kind of like how well we can imagine something that we can actually never imagine. You know, we can never know how life was, experientially, only from our own context of mind. Tecumseh says when the legends die, the dreams end, there is no more greatness. Vincent Fox says monuments and archaeological pieces serve as testimonies of man's greatness and establish a dialogue between civilizations showing the extent to which human beings are linked. In the previous quote, guys, when Tecumseh says when the legends die, the dreams end, there is no more greatness, you see the human civilization on some level deep down, because it requires an ability to survive, honors ability, right? Because it honors the potential of ability. To keep the potential of ability alive means that it's not just when legends die, like even when great technologies die, like the dreams end, there's no more greatness. So we have to be able to, as a species alive in 2022, to discriminate what are the most important, efficient technologies that are accessible to them, right? In both the inner realms and the outer realms. If somebody says, Mr. Within, can you give me an example of an inner realm technology other than language? I will tell you, like singing. When somebody sings, that's a way their inner realms are wired. They trust the rhythm of a pure emotion. When you trust it, when you have a pure emotion in the moment, it's as if you are being nothing, and it's as if like space moves matter in a way where impurity can never touch the space. So it's as if it's the knowing based on instantaneous presence. religious ideology to be capable of working with, let's say, non-religious ideology. I just read this quote right now on this site. It says, Abu Bakr, the greatness in the fear of God, contentment in faith of God, and honor in humility. There is greatness in the fear of God, contentment in faith of God, and honor in humility. It's as if the religious reality just wants to keep everything humble, right? So the moment all civilizations acknowledge the unknown, that's not incredible humility. But the boundary of human life, it's as if did God create all these human beings so they all act the same? It's like, did God create flowers to all be the same flower? Like, it's you see, there's a nature, there's a value to how each of our eyes is a being in the world. Usually civilizations are built based on closed ideological systems, but I am saying that man's civilization is an open ideological system, because rather than fighting for what truth has to be in a dualistic arena, the attention goes that what can truth be in a multidimensional arena. That means all realities are permissible. That means imagine everybody treated whatever they see in their inner realms something that is as real as its possibility. Anyways, I'll go back to the quote. I was just saying that if the whole species acknowledges the unknown, that religiously or secularly is where the ultimate humility. James Dean says the only greatness for man is immortality. Charles Kendall Adams says no student ever attains very eminent success by simply doing what is required of him. It is the amount and excellence of what is over and above the required that determines the greatness of ultimate distinction. John Buchan says the task of leadership is not to put greatness into humanity, but to elicit it, for the greatness is already there. Yeah. Just like, the potential to do a backflip is already there. The potential to be an advanced humanity and an advanced civilization, it's there. That's why I've said this quote often, where I say the advanced civilization is the future's birthright. An advanced civilization. Jim Valvano says what enables us to achieve our greatness contains the seeds of our destruction. William Hazlitt says no man, and somebody in the chat section says okay, never mind. We'll go back to the code tunnel. William Hazlitt says no man is truly great who is great only in his lifetime. The test of greatness is the page of history. That means that's kind of true. The greatness of this YouTube channel is dependent on how in the far future the idea of Mr.Within is still there. There was a moment where my mind playfully envisioned, this was like I got a vision of the world after my lifetime. And I just saw that maybe, the value of the moment is realized, and, in parks, there's going to be these stone, I don't know how to say it. Imagine the talks written on stone in parks. It's like somehow there was a way to transcribe these talks onto this rectangular stone, or not rectangular because that could be dangerous. Let's say cylindrical. I don't know how to say it, just the vision that, honestly, these Mr.Within talks, because they're on the internet, they're probably going to outlive me. it's like my voice is has a sort of like that part of communicating in cyberspace is like the immortalization of your voice and character. When James Dean said the only greatness for man is immortality, everybody who created like a social media or something, like a Facebook or something, it's kind of like in cyberspace they're immortal. They can be. I mean, now you can delete. But I'm saying like it's like it's like cyberspace is like a strange. It's like if we were to gift. It's like cyberspace is a gift for the future generations, which is like a world we're inputting simulations of reality. Francois de la Rochefoucauld says to achieve greatness one should live as if they will never die. Jim Valvano says, I read that, let me see. Athenaeus, oh my god. Athenaeus says goodness does not consist in greatness, but greatness in goodness. Charles Simon says true greatness consists in being great in little things. Jonathan Swift says, I never knew a man come to greatness or eminence who lay abed late in the Lord. Ralph Waldo Emerson says, Jesus Christ belonged to the true race of prophets. He saw with open eye the mystery of the soul, drawn by its severe harmony, ravished with its beauty, he lived in it and had his being there. Alone in all of history, he estimated the greatness of man. Nelson Boswell says the difference between greatness and mediocrity is often how an individual views a mistake. Daniel J. Boorstin says some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some hire public relations officers. Marianne Williamson says nothing liberates our greatness like the desire to help, the desire to serve. And I'm that person in these Mr.Within talks saying what is worthy, what every human being is worthy to serve is the advancement of civilization. It's the accessible legend of, it's like the attempt of one of the legends, right? Like we have the legend of like dragons, right? The advanced civilization, and that's the way I would say advanced civilization 2.0. It's the archaic, the legend of the king castles of the clouds. So what it means is that the greatness of the species is a legend that we have the opportunity to walk towards. Publius Cyrus says, do not despise the bottom rungs in the ascent to greatness. William Allen White says greatness, generally speaking, is an unusual quantity of a usual quality grafted upon a common man. Elgin Baylor says if you look up the definition of greatness in the dictionary, it will say Michael Jordan. I feel like that definition is true. It's what greatness is the unlocking of the next chapter of ability in a specific field. You see, it's like an advanced human being. It doesn't matter if the person is an advanced musician, an advanced designer, an advanced athlete. It's really just this effort. What is the soul, the energetic effort behind the free will that moves the free will, that is being the free will? Simone Biles says we strive for greatness. Matthew Arnold says greatness is a spiritual condition, a condition worthy to excite love, interest, and admiration. And the outward proof of possessing greatness is that we excite love, interest, and admiration. Really, what is there to admire? You know, it's like does the species just value the temporary? You know, the purpose, the value of an unknown world is just the infinite ways it can be known as we, march through time. Michael Jordan, I believe greatness is an evolutionary process that changes and evolves era to era. Christian McCaffrey says all the great players you ask always expect greatness. Exactly. Now the species, we need to expect collective greatness. You know, the person's like, I was so great to find individual freedom, individual enlightenment, right? Like the Buddha. But then there's like the Buddha, which is like this being has surpassed his individualism. So you serve and live as a collective being. Think of it this way. Right now, people are born and there's an individual life and then they pass away. But in the future, there's going to be a collective life, and the collective life is how, because you advance beyond the self, because you're aware of the self. Like imagine, it's like because the person could draw a line, then they could draw many lines. I don't know how to say it. When it comes to art, the person has to choose what sort of rhythm they move in. It's like the free will's decisions throughout the day can be seen as a hidden melody, and the body's hearing this melody and trying to act in accordance to it. Something is pulling us towards the discovery of reality. Like, this is the remarkable thing about being a human being. We are in our eyes have a journey. Thomas Carlyle says, he says, man's unhappiness, as I construe, comes of his greatness. It is because there is an infinite in him, which with all his cunning he cannot quite bury under the finite. Elizabeth Barrett Browning says, an ignorance of means may minister to greatness, but an ignorance of aims makes it impossible to be great at all. Because really what it is, like what greatness is how your energy has an intent in the world. How is intelligence animating? What is the capability? Fascinating. If somebody says what will happen to our minds in the future, the answer could be that our minds will be the future. That means they will be the moment. That means to be a human being was a romantic phase of the planet system. But to be a planetary being, like literally, I'm saying that we are existing, so we have an existential relationship with the cosmos, but we are also conscious, so we have a conscious experiential relationship with the cosmos, and if both of these are synchronized to pretty much in anything we're doing, we're like, okay, what is the greatness of the greatest, let's say the world of worlds, the greatest greatness, in any field, right? The idea is we can't advance a civilization if only one part of the civilization is acting advanced. Something has to allow 8 billion human beings to be so fascinated by the future that advancement is the only route. When the past is past and we've seen it, and the present we're just being in, the future is the wonder of the world, I'll read a few more quotes and end this off. Lou Williams says, greatness is contagious. Lionel Richie says, greatness comes from fear. Fear can either shut us down and we go home, or we fight through it. Eckhart Tolle says, so many people have the idea, I want to achieve something great or be somebody great, and they neglect the step that leads to greatness. They don't honor this step at this moment because they have this idea of some future moment where they're going to be great. You see, there is an inner greatness that, sure, we take the Taoistic approach and action through inaction is the ultimate, or we realize that when it comes to our outer realms, it's like saying an inventor, somebody envisions an invention in their mind that they can invent it, and then imagine somebody coming and telling them, hey man, you don't need to envision your invention to have it built because you imagined it once. It's like that's enough, right? So it's as if, what does the inventor do what does the external inventor do with an internal vision of an invention, right? And really, hilariously, the vision, and this is at least is concerned to the dimension of language of human psychology, it would be like, what is the greatest story we can tell ourselves? And for me, the advanced civilization is the winning argument. The advanced potential of our future gives a value. Imagine somebody was like, okay, all the yogis who are telling me to sit still and silent, to get enlightened, it's as if, okay, I came to the here and now, I saw the here and now, and then what do I do here and now? And the yogic advice is to do nothing to escape samsara, but I will tell you, once you do nothing, you're going to realize that the sense of self that was selecting a value of truth is actually hollow. So what it means is that you realize you're not just an idea, and then you're freed from that, from any idea really. There is an experiential presence that's just being here in an unknown way. It shouldn't be forgotten. So I guess for this episode, I'll leave, everybody can, go buy a notebook and write an essay, on what is the greatest greatness? What is the greatness of all greatness? And, yeah. That's a sort of, philosophical assignment for anybody who wants to write an essay on that. Anyways, thanks guys for listening. And sometimes living for the greatness of the world of worlds, it's another way of saying appreciating how great something can be. Our minds are so conditioned to fear and suffer that we're at some point we'll have to wonder, what else is the mind built for? Imagine somebody afraid, inefficient, or weak, as if when will the moment arrive where the mind wonders about what else can happen. So anyways, thanks for listening guys. Rise, mankind, rise. And just to check to see if I spoke about the subtitle, oh yeah, and truth awaits. Much blessings and honest.